and experiencing the Cuban dance music scene was incredible. And DJing, the Cuban, in Cuba during that. Recording in Cuba was amazing in that period, and then DJing in Cuba, because there was nobody that I know of. There wasn't a lot of Americans. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but there wasn't a lot of Americans at all, going to Cuba to DJ. So I was so blessed by those opportunities and getting to experience that, really unique opportunities, like life-changing.
Today is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. Who are we speaking with?
Hey, this is Erick Paredes. How are you, Mama?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. I'm well, thanks.
What is your intention when you DJ?
My intention? Oh, to take people on a journey and to enjoy the music, the vibe, myself, and to transmit that onto the audience. I feel it's a transmission, like a transmission, like this. I find it really interesting. I feel like DJs are kind of like antennas. I feel like, like when a DJ is DJing, whatever we're feeling, I think people are tuning on to it, like kind of like how live musicians are able to kind of like on an energetic level when musicians are playing. I think people, when they're watching them and hearing the music, they're experiencing like what the musician is experiencing, allowing them to have an experience that they normally don't have because they're not musicians. I feel the musician is kind of the same thing. I think when a musician's playing, they're really feeling the energy of what they're doing, their passion, the electricity, and they get those shivers, and a DJ's feeling that. I think they're transmitting that to the audience. Kind of like a channeling type thing, if I may be that esoteric about it.
Describe the feeling when you're DJing and you have the crowd in the palm of your hands.
Oh, it's amazing. Such a beautiful feeling. I think it's like the goal, being able to do that is being able to really, you have freedom. When I feel like, like when you're playing and the crowd is in and they're having such a great time that you feel like you can take chances and you can feel like you can take 90-degree turns and it's gonna work out, and you do it and it works out. You feel like, you know what I mean? That's such a beautiful feeling. It's a feeling of joy and freedom,
Tell us about give us a primer of the Miami music scene for those that don't know.
A primer,
give us
like
talk about
currently, historically,
both historically and then current.
Well, Miami is really interesting. It has like a culture of soulful music, like Betty Wright, TK Records, on and on and on. Even James Brown, like had a stint here. So many artists that you wouldn't think of, even the Bee Gees had a recording studio here for a long time. I mean, it's just mentioning those doesn't do it justice. There's so many more historically, but Miami has a distinct flavor in the sense that it's very Latin and it's very Caribbean as well. So the music here reflects that the proximity to Latin America and the Caribbean. It's like, it's a different mix, I think, than other parts of the United States. The mood here is joyous because we have sunshine, like all the time. So what tends to work here normally are things that may sound a little too happy in other places at different times. Definitely a different mood than Detroit per se, or Chicago, or even New York, cities where it's colder, where the vibes tend to be deeper, a little darker. In Miami, we have that as well, but Miami tends to be a little bit on the more tropical, funky side, but happy, joyous. That I feel is what tends to work. here in terms of sound. Where it is right now, I feel like Miami's constantly in a state of transition. Always transitioning. It's always changing because it's so how could I put it? It's so transient. It's so transient. Like, like every every year we have a different batch of people that are coming from all over the world. And that lends itself for like experimentation and it's like which is great. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing in a way because a lot of the people, the artists, the DJs that come here are here very like for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years and then they take off, or maybe even for a season and mostly just for one weekend. So Miami tends to be very transient. It's always been. Um, right now, I feel that the scene is really interesting, especially with the advent of the hi-fi bars. Vinyl seems to be having a big search, a big uprising in the last couple of years. We had like Dante's Hi-Fi, for example, which is amazing, amazing club with Rich Medina and Sven and the guys over there doing an amazing job. But that's also like influenced a lot of other people that have opened up like hi-fi restaurants like Miami Sound Bar and Jolene. There's a lot of interest in that, which I find that amazing and great. And there's a lot of like demand for vinyl feel. There's a big scene here. Other than clubs, there's a big scene for upscale hotels, restaurants that where they want alternative music and where they want house music or Brazilian music. I find that really unique. Like, it happens in all cities, but because Miami is such a touristic place, it tends to have like, and it's there's so many upscale hotels and venues that there's a scene for that. If you're playing house music, you can play the clubs, but you could also play swimming pools and at an upscale hotel, and those kind of gigs, are like they're very prominent here, you know. Um, yeah, I mean that's what I could say for now. Anything more specific about what you'd like to know about Miami?
Just in general, I mean, you painted a lovely picture. Just thinking like from an outsider, if someone's coming to Miami from the weekend or for a week from, say, Germany, what should they
Right.
expect? Where should they go to party? What should they expect?
Yeah.
Hey, like paint a picture for them.
Well,
Say,
Miami has it's interesting because Miami has two or three different faces. And the face that most people know about Miami is the more commercial, more mainstream face, which is like, everybody wants to come to Miami and wants to hear like has that this idea of like uh reggaeton and bling bling and like uh the Latin side, but the very commercial side. A lot of people unfortunately come to Miami and they just go to South Beach and experience South Beach and experience like they go out and they're like, hey, like this is all like commercial. What the hell, and they go back home and they have this bad idea of Miami. But Miami is much more than that, obviously. But like for example, there's areas such as where I live in Wynwood, where it's more alternative. Although even Wynwood has become so gentrified now that it's constantly changing. Like even Wynwood is like it's on a downward kind of like climax. It's climax, and now it's um, where there's more like in these areas. There's more alternative music. There's more like bars and restaurants that don't cater specifically to tourists. And that's where you find you know the best music in Miami is at these places. And another thing about Miami that's really interesting is that down in the downtown area, we're open till like super late, like 4 or 5. Like Club Space is the biggest space and the biggest club in Miami. And they have like, they go until like noon the next day. And it's really interesting because a lot of times like they have like yoga, for example, yoga at like at 11 a.m. and and you get these people well, you got like waves of people who are coming to see their favorite DJ at 7 a.m. So they're like waking up early, or 8 a.m. They're waking up early, brushing their teeth, completely sober, gonna like, jam to like their favorite DJ, and so, and you got like the people who have been partying for 3 days straight, you know what I mean, who have been partying the whole night and they're completely off their minds. And there's this crossroads downtown of like this craziness. It's like people like, going to see their favorite DJ at 7 a.m., people completely wrecked at 7 a.m. And like, and people going to do yoga at Club Space with their little mats, getting ready for 11. It's completely mad, but it's great. It's really cool. That's a little bit of a picture of what you could expect in Miami, And on top of that, like I mentioned, like all these little bars and clubs, smaller clubs that play alternative music. It's not a lot of it. It's not like, it's not like we have a massive scene here on a regular basis. We do have a very present scene. There's always something to do. But it's seasonal. We do have a massive scene like come December, come March, Winter Music Conference, when these festivals are taking place. Miami's hard to beat. Like nowhere else in the world do you find like this amount of events going on at the same time during that period of time. But for the most part, it's a pretty contained scene. Most of the year. Summers are brutal in Miami. Like most DJs are just trying to flip and survive and hanging out because nobody's here in the summer. Like everybody's just from New York, it's back in New York, or wherever they're coming from, and it's like pretty dead here, like musically, So you just gotta get creative and try to find like a residency and hang on, you know what I mean, until the season gets back, That's pretty much the rhythm here in Miami.
Tell us, I have two questions.
Mhm.
We met at the Winter Music Conference over a decade ago. Tell people what the
Mhm.
Winter Music Conference was, A, and then B, talk to us about the transformation that happens in Miami during the Ultra Festival and how that changed the city during that period of time.
Oh my God, man! Like Miami Winter Music Conference, the Winter Music Conference, as you know, was flipping amazing. It was like nothing else. It was like, I would say like its heydays were probably like in the late 90s. Like I want to say like, like 96, 97. Those were great years. 99, or even the 2000s, 2001, 2003, 2004. Unbelievable. I mean, like, like it was just like, put it this way, it's like Disneyland for DJs. It was like, you'd walk down the street in South Beach and like, you're bumping, like, you'd wear a badge, with your name on it, you buy a subscription, and with the subscription, there'd be basically a hotel. Different hotels would host the event, and there'd be forums where you would go in and you could hear like your favorite DJ, like you name it, like like hosting a panel on different subjects, so you can get educated on that. That aspect of it was amazing, the networking aspect. Then pool parties during the day and beach parties, and you'd walk out, and it's like everybody's a DJ. It's like a city full of DJs. Everywhere you look, there's like you're like like you'd see people like carrying records or carrying like carrying their records on trolleys and stuff, bumping into each other. Everybody meeting each other. It's like your favorite DJ, you bump into him, and it's like, oh my God, like. Francois K or Joe Classell or Ron Trent or Mike Clark from Detroit, or good friends like yourself, you know what I mean? Like turn around and boom, there you are, taking pictures, interviewing people, and it was like, and it'd be like, oh my God, here, take this record. Oh, did you hear my last record? Hear this, you know what I mean? And like, and deals would be made right there and then. He goes, yo, hold on, man, um, have you met so and so? He goes, you should meet so and so and be like, hey, this is so and so. Oh yeah, I heard about you. Blah blah blah. Boom, record deals being made right there on the street. And of course the pool parties like legendary. And then the only problem was just figuring out where you're gonna go, like because you couldn't split yourself in 20 places. But absolutely amazing. And then, you know, because of like a lot of political things, I want to say, there was disagreements about the date, you know, and the different parties that were involved with the Winter Music Conference. You know, Ultra and the Winter Music Conference, they had different ideas in regards to the timing, and you know, from what I understand, I'm not like, you know, an authority, but from what I understand is there was some disagreements in terms of like the dates, and then this decided to split, and that kind of like, you know, was the beginning of the end, you know, separating Ultra Music Festival from the Winter Music Conference. Then, like, you know, I think they both suffered, and that, you know, changed a lot of things. Moving forward from there, it's just been like, you know, it's just been a downward spiral for as far as the Winter Music Conference is concerned. But it's always a good time in March. Like, you know, I would encourage anybody to come. Even like the last few years for Miami Music Week, it's still amazing. Still an amazing amount of events going on, amazing amount of DJs, but nowhere near what it was, you know. It's funny because a lot of times I have friends that come during Miami Music Week, and they're blown away. They're like, "Oh my God, you know, like there's so much going on." I'm like, "You have no idea what you missed out on." You know what I mean? Yeah, like so. Yeah, so now I think we're in that state of like I feel that it's a good time. I feel like, you know, we're on an upward swing right now as far as Miami. I really feel that things are cooking in Miami. Um, I don't know if it's the economic climate overall, or just the social environment of the United States, but I feel that, you know, like there's a lot of resurgence. I mean, there's massive investments going on, massive constructions. So I feel that it's Miami's on an upward spiral again, but it's going to be completely different. It's hard to say what it's going to be like, but it's a different city than it was obviously 10 years ago, 15 years ago when we met.
No, that was super helpful and comprehensive. Um, let's. What would you say is the current state of the scene in general?
I think it's good, really good. Um, I think I like what's made it really good, I think, is these hi-fi venues. You know, like I think Dante's has been instrumental for the scene. You know, like they've just been doing a phenomenal job. On any given weekend, you're gonna find like, you know, like artists like Louis Vega or Osunlade or Quantic, or you know, just very high caliber DJs, accessible in a small venue with a great sound system, sometimes even in the patio, you know, they throw bigger parties for free for the most part. It's unbelievable, you know, to be able to have that kind of like intimacy, great sound systems. People, it's very unique in the world, you know. Again, like, you know, that's Rich Medina and the crew, Sven, you know, doing a phenomenal job. Um, yeah, so I think that that's helped out a lot. I mean, in the scene that I'm in, that's what I see, that I can tell you that it's made a big difference, you know. And I can mostly just speak from that scene, but there's so many scenes. There's like, you know, there's the harder side of house music, you know, like which is space and all that, which they're also doing a phenomenal job. They've also been renovating. They're also coming back. So I feel like, you know, things are cooking, you know, and the scene has been good. As far as Latin music and Brazilian music, has been phenomenal as well. You know, there's been a resurgence for Latin music everywhere, and specifically like for alternative Latin music. You know, like hardcore salsa, rare groove Brazilian, you know, all that stuff, or like, you know, African music. You know, I wanted to say Afrobeat, but when I mean Afrobeat, I mean like fela and, you know, just African rare grooves and stuff like that. There's a huge demand for that right now, I feel, you know. More so than 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, you know.
Let's talk about DJ residencies. What happened to the DJ residency, and is it still required or relevant these days?
Well, for me, yes. For me, I can say from my personal experience, yes. My For me, my bread and butter has been residencies. Playing like at I mean, I do like clubs, like I do like one-offs here and there, but it's like one-offs. It's not very for me. It's not very like reliable. Like playing 2 to 3 times a month at a club or at a festival locally. It's not doesn't help you to sting yourself. What does is the residencies. The residencies, especially my niche has been the upscale, places like Soho Beach House, like private club. And the great thing about it is that again, like they've never told me what to play. They hired me to do me, and I'm able to like to play what I consider good music, like house, you know, like Latin, Afro, funk, soul, just soulful music. And the same thing, I've been doing that, Soho, like or Faina, or like gigs like the Satai, who's lasted, but the original one for me was a really long time ago. I don't know if you remember the Delano Hotel, the Delano. That was unbelievable. That was like in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003. And these were like these kind of like it was one of the first boutique hotels. So, and they kind of established, like kind of set the bar, and everybody kind of followed. And it was like it happened at the same time that the lounge scene took off. Remember the Hotel Costas, the Buddha Bar, you know? So that was great because you had like the boutique hotels, and now they wanted Hotel Costas and Buddha Bar, which opened it up to playing house music. Now it's like, you could play deep house, you could play naked music, you could play like, anything groovy and funky. It was like beautiful. And yeah, all the boutiques wanted it. And to this day, that culture is still in Miami. Although not to the point where it was been then. But yeah, there's still a lot of places where you can play good music, where you can have a residency at an upscale place. Well, they pay, they pay fairly well. They pay decently. I mean, when you're doing a residency, you're obviously not going to charge as much as you would like one-offs, but there's more volume. You got guaranteed work, and yeah, so that works out really well. And again, it's like the continuation of the lounge. The lounge scene is pretty much dead, but it kind of transformed. It kind of like it went from lounge scene to rare grooves. you know, like because lounge wasn't hip anymore. Like Hotel Costas and all that stuff wasn't hip, but you could still play house music. So it kind of like okay, the lounge scene faded out, and now you're like you're left. Okay, what do you guys want to hear now? Oh, now you want to hear the real Brazilian music. Whereas before, you know what I mean? It was like all the lounge scene was made up of like if it was Brazilian, it was Brazilian-ish. Like, it was like Brazilian influenced. You know what I mean? It was fun while it lasted, but it wasn't the real deal. Um, it was like a lot of like sample-based stuff. But then after, like after the lounge scene faded, like I said, like now people had an introduction, and now they were ready to like, okay, now let me hear like I heard the loungy version of house. Let me hear the real deal now. And that made it really cool. That made it really, really interesting because now you have created a platform. And I think like, that's kind of happened like for a few years now. And now it's like, we're like that whole scene is like evolved to the point where it's like now they're like almost like wanting rare groups. They want vinyl now. So it's like an evolution. It's like it's been evolving from the boutique hotels to the lounge scene as an introduction to the fade out of the lounge scene to where now they were more open to hearing like more like real good house music, not loungy house music. And they were open to hearing more like cultural music, Brazilian, Latin. And now they're like okay, now that I feel that there's a demand, at least for me, there's a demand where now they're more ready to, okay, now I want to hear like, give me some vinyl, give me like the real deal, give me the deep stuff. So that's kind of the way I sense it from my perspective. Now, again, that might not be everybody's perspective, but I can only speak from like what I'm experiencing, you know?
Thank you for that. That was super helpful. You started releasing records for Miami house music labels in the 90s. What inspired you to
Yeah.
step into the world of music production? And how did the Miami music scene shape your sound back then?
Oh man, back then. So I started out like break as a break dancer as a kid. Being I was born in the Bronx, you know, I'm a b-boy at heart.
Wait, where in the Bronx were you born?
I was born in Girard Avenue by the Yankee Stadium,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't grow up there. I was born there.
Where did you
And
grow
then
up?
I grew up in Peru. Like after I was born, my parents took me to Lima. My parents are Peruvian. So my first influences were obviously Latin music, you know, being Peruvian and Peru, and, you know, and during those times, you know, the 70s, 80s was like super musical, like a super musical family. So I grew up with Latin music, but also like super influential for me was my mom took me to see Saturday Night Fever. So Saturday Night Fever.
What
Yeah.
was that like? And
So
how did that affect you?
that changed my life. I like, you know, like to the point where I didn't realize how much it changed my life, but put it this way, I was obsessed. Like I thought I was John Travolta to the point I was always dancing, like, you know, like doing like, you know, like these moves and stuff. Like I was a little kid, I was a baby. And my mom thought it was so cute that she got me a suit. She got me like a little suit. And then there'd be like parties at the house, you know, like Latin families, like Christmas time. Well, not more like before Christmas. Like, there'd always be parties, like you know, and they'd be like, "Oh, Eric, come on, you gotta dance." You go, "No, mom, no, I'm not gonna dance." No, dance, dance, dance. And everybody would be like, "Eric, dance." And I would say, "Okay." I'll pretend like I'm walking towards the kitchen, and then I'd come back in sliding on my knees. You know what I mean? They put on the music and shit, and I was like, I was John Travolta, dude. So it's only like now that I realize, oh my God, I was dancing to like all those like, you know, all those like amazing disco music, you know, like that was like a major influence. From there, actually, I moved to Montreal. And in Montreal, like, you know, that's where I really like, you know, had a crew, dancing crew, Royal Majestic crew. And, you know, like that was like, I was like, my mom would say, hey, you know, you got to get serious. What are you going to do with your life? You know, you got to like, you know, focus, you know, what are you going to do? He goes, mom, don't worry, I'm going to be a dancer. I would tell her, and she'd be like, oh, geez, there's no word, what can I do? So, but it was then that I like, you know, I saw this kid, Yano, and he'd be like, you know, I went to his house and he had like turntables and a mixer and he was scratching and then that changed my world. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then I realized that the reason that I was so into dancing was not so much for the dancing. The dancing was just an expression of like the music that I was loving and enjoying. It's the music that I loved. It was like, you know, it wasn't so much, it was the dancing. Obviously, I love dancing, but the music was what was driving. So I could do without dancing and just focusing on the music. You know what I mean? Like I realized that then that was like what I wanted to do. Then what happened was we moved to Toronto. I know my parents were all over the place. You know, but it's a blessing. It was a blessing because I was exposed to so many different cultures, languages from very early. My parents moved to Toronto. So when I was in Toronto, I went, you know, I was into hip hop. I was like, you know, listening to like, you know, oh, Treacherous Tree, you know, like this is like back in the day of like before even BDP, the Roxanne and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like you know, like Just Ice, the deep, like you know, like the back in the day when you had to tune into the radio station and like have an antenna. It was like CKLN, like in Fantastic Voyage program, Ron Nelson. You know, you'd have to tune in and stuff like that and hear like Curtis Blow and shit. You know, uh, that was my world. You know, like I collected tapes and but my parents took me to Peru for the summer. Like I think 2 summers I went to Peru. And my grandfather, like he was like, he's amazing and one of the most beautiful human beings you'd ever meet. Like, he would tell me, okay, Eric, you like music? Okay, no worries. Like what do you want? You know, you like records? Okay, let me take you to the record store. You know what I mean? He goes, anything I'll buy you any kind of record you want. If it's records and books, I'll get them for you because it's an investment into your life, your culture, you know. So so he offered me, like he would take me to the store and say, okay, what do you want? You know what I mean? Like just, but there would be mostly Latin music that was like, you know, I was getting turned on to Latin music again, like, you know, especially salsa and shit, because over there it's like, you know, like you live it. You go out on the street and you're like hearing it everywhere at the market, there's the radio, at the house. My grandmother being Peruvian, I don't know if you ever had Peruvian food. Have you ever had Peruvian food? Peruvian food's really, really good. My grandmother was an excellent chef, but she couldn't cook without the radio, without listening to salsa, like you know the radio station. Matter of fact, like I remember like one of the times, the radio broke, and she said she couldn't cook, so we had to go out. We had to go out and fix the radio. It turned out to be the batteries, but it was a flipping crisis. We were all gonna starve to death. You know what I mean? Because it's like, dude, it's like, you know, like we had to like get her the radio, turn it back on, and it's like, oh, she was okay, she was back on. Okay, okay, now she can cook, you know? And the food was insane. Yeah, so that's like to the point that, you know, like music is like just a part of family life. It's part of connected to the food, deeply connected to the food. It's part of the seasoning, you know, it's your sazon, it comes from the salsa, you know what I mean? The grooves, you know. Um, so being that I was visiting, I just got absorbed back to Latin music. I took back a bunch of Latin records to Toronto, to Toronto, right? And then when I was tuning into 88.1 CKLN, that college radio station, you know, there was a Latin show right after the hip hop show. So I would like stay on and listen to it. And there was this radio disc jockey, Richard Paul. He was a musicologist. He used to play excellent music, amazing music, but he didn't have the latest shit that I had just brought back. And I'm like 15 years old. I'm like 15, 16, right? So I was already in the habit of calling like the radio station and requesting my jams and shouting out my peeps and shit like that. Yo, this Eric, whatever, shouting out. You know what I mean? Like Scarborough Posse, you know what I mean? You know how we shout each other out, you know? So I was already in the habit. I had that shit on speed dial. So I called them and I said, hey, you know, I love your radio show, you know, but I just got back from Peru and I have like 2 crates of music of all new stuff that you know that I think you should check out. You don't have any other stuff, brand new. And he said, oh my God, really? He said, for sure, yeah, come down, you know, can you come next week to the station? Sure. So I showed up there and I'm like this freaking snot-nosed kid with radio, you know what I'm showing up to the radio station. And yeah, so I gave him a bunch of records. I said, well, you know, okay, Eric, what do you got? What should I play? I remember like back then it was mostly like it was salsa romantica, like you know, like Eddie Santiago, and like I had a lot of that stuff, but I also had some Eddie Palmieri, and I had some Ponceña and some hard salsa stuff. So I started handing him records. So okay, give me one, let me try it. So you know, so I gave it, and it's like, oh, this is really good. Okay, give me another one, you know. Next thing you know, it's like, you know, we're like having fun. He's playing a bunch of my records, and then somebody calls the station to do a request, but he didn't speak Spanish. So he put me on. So I took down, oh, okay, okay, quiere una dedicación, blah, blah. I wrote it down in Spanish. And then, you know, we got back on the air and he's talking. He says, oh, there's a dedication for, and he couldn't like say the dedication, the names. He says, Eric, why don't you say it? So I said it. I said, oh, es una dedicación especial, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, okay, cool. At the end of the show, he said, oh, would you like to come back next week? You know, and I started doing the announcements, and then I became co-host of this radio station, like, you know, like the biggest like Latin music show in Toronto at the time, Latin Party. And thanks to Richard Paul, may he rest in peace. is an amazing mentor of mine. Like, you know, turned out like I was with him for the radio show for like 4 or 5 years. And it was really cool because I was like 15 and now I was like everybody in Toronto knew me. Like, you know, even the hip hop kids knew me because, you know, because it was like on the same station. So now I'm known all over the city and I'm like only 15 years old. It got to the point where it's like I'd get invited by MTV to like host, like, you know, like they'd interview me and I'd take them around the city. And I was able to like to introduce, like when they would book like Willie Colon, for example, right? Willie Colon would come into town and I would be the guy to introduce them to the stage. So I'd get on stage first. Ladies and gentlemen, Erick Paredes from CKLA. And I'd go on there, like, you know, 16 years old. He goes, Damas y caballeros, you know, El Malo, Willie Colon, you know, and he'd come and it's like, and like, you know, I was rubbing elbows with like Willie Colon and with Yomo Toro and all the big artists that would come to Miami, like to Toronto. I would know them and I was like 16. Super freaky the way that worked out. I guess I should have known I was a lifer then, you know. And then what happened was I started, like, you know, to get into production, sampling and stuff, and I had a vision of like Latin hip hop, like, you know, I was very influenced by by just what was going on with sampling, and I had this vision of like sampling Latin music and doing hip hop, but more on a deeper level than what was currently going on. Because at that time it was like a lot of Gerardo and very like a lot of pops type of like Latin hip hop stuff. So yeah, so I got myself a sampler and that's how I got into it. My parents moved to Miami. I followed them. They moved back and I stayed. And when I came, I was working here, like, you know, with Island Records, working with Joe Galdo on a project. And then I started to, like, you know, I was always listening to house music, even from Toronto, because Toronto is very close to Detroit. So we would get records from Detroit. Like I had some friends of mine that would like go across the border, buy records, and bring them back for the record stores in Toronto. So we were getting like music from Detroit and from Chicago, like practically like the same weekend as they were hitting the stores. So I was a crossover kid completely. I was like, you know, like in essence, I was hip hop, but I was also listening to house music because it was what's going on. But I was like my roots being Latin and having the Latin radio show, you know. So when I came down to Miami, I was working with Island and stuff, but then I started to, like, you know, I said I want to do house rap. I loved house music and it was like something that I wanted to do. And yeah, then um I met the Murk guys, but before the Murk guys, it was Carlos Santos from Underground Records, Vibe Records. I don't know if you know that label, Vibe Records. They were the same label that distributes Murk. Same, like, you know. So I met George Acosta. So with George Acosta, we kind of started out together. We met him and I used to go to his house and we used to like jam and we put out like a bunch of 12 inches, you know. And they were like, you know, like they were good enough to where people wanted more, you know. It's like we started working like with independent record labels, like with Vibe Records. I started putting out solo things, you know, again with the same distribution network as Murk. You know, it's like Carlos Santos, Underground Records. Underground Records was a record store near Calle Ocho, I believe. Like this was back in the 90s, so my memory is like not that good, but it was back then. It was a very cool scene back in those days in Miami, as far as house music was. It was mostly a gay scene, you know, in Miami back in the early 90s. And it was really good. It was a really, really good scene, you know. You had like, you know, man, so many like amazing like places like Paragon, you know. I don't know if you remember that club, but it was like, you know, like because Miami, South Beach was really revamped by the gay scene. In you know, it was like really like, you know, the fashion photographers would come here and take pictures of like, you know, they found that it was cheap. The light was great, you know. It was very affordable for them to come here instead of going to Europe. So the more they started doing that, the more they started to like, you know, the more the fashion, the tastemakers started to come here, who were mostly gay at that time, and started opening up clubs, and that's really was like I think that the little spark that made like South Beach blow up, you know, the way it did. So yeah, so that was the beginnings, and I also worked with Nightbeat Records. I worked with Mark Walker, had a label. Mark Walker, who later worked at Track Source. I don't know if you know Mark, but really like, you know, all these people like, you know, George Alvarado. So it was like Carlos Santos, Vibe Records, George Alvarado from Nightbeat Records, started doing stuff with him, and Mark Walker from ESP, I believe the name of the record. So it's like those three labels that I was mostly affiliated with, and I put out like maybe like I want to say like 15 or 20 singles back in those days. It was so funny because it was like, you know, I had to pay my rent, and back in those days you would get like minimum $500 advance for a record. And I had very rudimentary equipment. I only had a sampler, like an EPS sampler, and it was like, you know, yo, the rent is up like in like 10 days, you know. So all of a sudden you get real creative. You stop making excuses, you know, spark the EPS up, just get like creative, you know, and then put it on the DAT, you know. It's like then go to the DAT, you know, like go with the DAT to the record label and play it for them, you know. It's like, yeah, you like it? Yeah, okay, awesome. But walk out of there with $500, pay the rent. And that's what led up to like 20 flipping singles. You know what I mean? I didn't have been for flipping that system, I wouldn't have paid my rent, man. You know, you had to do it, you know? And yeah, it was beautiful, beautiful times, man. Beautiful times, final times, you know.
Great stories. Thank you for sharing. Reflecting on your residencies at different Miami venues, were there any defining moments or performances that impacted your career, or an audience interaction that shaped your perspective on music?
Oh, yes, so many. What all of them really, like, you know, we really learn from all of them. Like, you learn different things from all of them, you know. Um, you know, you learn from the good things and you learn from the bad things, you know. You learn like, you know, what to do, what works great and what not to do, and you know, you just gain confidence. I think the Delano was pivotal for me, you know, playing with live musicians at the Delano. Back in those days, that's when I started to like, you know, to because I was already producing music, so I already had some experience working with musicians, directing musicians, like, you know, because I'd have musicians come to my house or come go to the studio, and I'd say, okay, yeah, listen to this, I want this like this or like that, or I'd give them like, you know, a rudimentary line, and I was already like directing musicians, but in a context of a studio. So I wanted to like, you know, so I started inviting percussionists, and it was working really well. And I had other musician friends who would come to my sessions and they'd like play bass, and I'd say, holy crap, you know, we could just jam, you know, I could just play loops. So I had like, you know, I could just play loops and do jam sessions. So I started doing that, and then the Delano hired me to do exactly that, but they gave me like a really great budget. They like, you know, they gave me like I forgot what it was, but it was over $1,200, which at that time was really good. You know, plus food and plus like a bottle of champagne and a bottle of like of liquor and beers, you know, which is actually more important than as far as the musicians were concerned, because you could leverage that to invite musicians, you know, like local musicians. And we started doing these live sessions at the Delano, and there was like minimum 5 to 6 musicians. And it was like I would just basically invite different musicians. I would pay some of them, and some of them, like, you know, if it was like their first time or we wanted to try them out or wanted to join them, I said, look, I can't really pay you because we already kind of like, you know, I already paid these guys, but if you want to join us for a couple of songs, and you get free booze, you know, like we got champagne, you know, you can bring your girl, It's like, oh, really? Okay, good. And they would show up. So we'd have like, we'd have these jams that kept like, developing, and we developed this language, like, like for example, like I play a song, a loop or a series of loops, and something worked, and I say, okay, remember that, remember that we did that, and then half the time they wouldn't remember it, but half the time they would. So we started to develop like a really nice set, and that's really where I like I developed my chops in terms of working with musicians, feeling really comfortable with that. That was a really good moment. Another great moment that was like life changing, life defining was what happened when I played in Brazil. I had a residency. I got played these amazing events in Brazil. So through the Delano, like a gentleman approached me who said he wanted to take me to Brazil. He loved how I played and wanted to take me to Brazil, and for New Year's to play a gig in New Year's Eve. And I was like, what? Like, like that sounds too good to be true, whatever, And and he says, yeah, I'm gonna come back and check up on you. And like in a few months. And I said, okay, cool, like whatever, let's see if it happens, Sure enough, um 3 months into it, it's like comes to I was working at base at that time. I don't even remember base. A base was remember that music store? It was like a CD bar,
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
right? That was the spot, right? That was really cool. Like I learned a lot in play. Like it was a bar, but instead of having music, alcohol, you had CDs. You had like little pods. You could listen to music. Yeah. So he came and he's like, yeah, I want to take you to Brazil. Like, like, are you ready to go? Like, you're gonna be my DJ in Brazil. So I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, okay, yeah. So much do you want? We worked out a deal. And yeah, you're gonna go and play in Brazil. Okay, cool. And so time comes around, he gives me my ticket, I got my visa, I end up in Brazil. So um I'm in Brazil, and it's in a penthouse apartment, like in Copacabana. And it was just like I've never seen anything like it. Just being in Brazil was just like unbelievable. It's just like the whole vibe was just massive. Like it's just like millions and millions of people. Like you're looking down. It's like a huge penthouse that had like 3 floors of glass, looking at the ocean, and then underneath, like the beach. But leading up to New Year's Eve, it was so many people that like there was a point, and everybody's dressed in white, right? And 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 we're like, what the hell's going on here? Is that sand or is that people? It's like, just this vibe, you know? And it was like, wow, man, that's crazy. So, so yeah, leading up to the night, you could feel the energy. It was just unbelievable. You still get shivers just thinking about it. Like 6 p.m., getting ready, you already start seeing. And as the night progresses, you start feeling like this rhythm, like just like a massive rhythm. So I DJ. The person who took me, by the way, amazing friend, turned out to be an amazing friend, great person, Gio Darder. He's watching, Gio Darder. Amazing, like one of the best party organizers, event producers you could imagine. Like his stuff was conceptual. So it turns out that this party, so I played the party and it went phenomenal. One of my best gigs ever. It was like just the vibe and the music and the people, and like just like I remember like I played a batucada. It's called train batucada, which starts off really, really slow. And I timed it so that I think it's like 4 minutes, 23 seconds. So 4 minutes, 23 seconds prior to midnight, I played it, but it starts really slow. And it's like, all of a sudden people are partying, all of a sudden the music stops, And it's just, you hear this batucada starting slowly and it builds up and until it goes into frantic. And exactly at midnight, it explodes. The song explodes at the same time that fireworks go off. So it was like spectacular. Everybody freaked out. It was just unbelievable. They took my pictures, right? And it turns out that this party was a party that was affiliated to a magazine called Caras magazine, which is like a magazine for the rich and famous, and it's like for all the biggest stars of Brazil. So they took my picture and like hugging with all these people. I didn't know who they were. Turns out they were all these like like superstars in Brazil. So next thing you know, they think I'm a superstar in Brazil. You know what I mean? Like so I'm like, you know what I mean? These people see me on the magazine and shit like that. They think, oh my God, this guy's like a superstar from, you know what I mean? So it's like, so that led for me getting booked again and again. Like I did, I think that event I did like, I think I did like 3 years, 3 years in a row, And then that developed into other relationships. And I eventually played in Brazil. Like I went to Brazil, I've been to Brazil like 20 times. So yeah, eventually I got invited to open up for Seu Jorge here in Miami, Daniela Mercury, then I became good friends with Marcelino da Lua from Bossa Cucanova, who's like an amazing, like they're like legendary Brazilian musicians. Oh my God, I met I got to meet Marcelo Yuca. Rest in peace, Marcelo Yuca's like we turned out to be like a really good friend, but he was one of the most important musicians that Brazil ever had, like because the biggest reggae band in Brazil is called it's Ohapa, and he was the drummer for Ohapa, and um and he was like a poet but a social activist. So I became really good friends with him. He had gotten shot. Like when I met him, he was in a wheelchair, he couldn't walk. Um, and because he was trying to help somebody not get shot in a carjacking, so he pushed the car out of the way and he got shot. But anyways, he was like a national hero. Like all of his music, like such deep, beautiful social message music. He's like a figure in Brazil, but I had the chance to to get to know him and become his friend. So that was like a really, really, really important, life-changing, gig for me. Some other notable ones is obviously playing with Francois K in Cielo in New York. Like that was really, really nice too. Did it with Francois and with King Brit. Cielo was really fun. It was like really, really fun. I'm so glad I caught that. Um, yeah, but some of the my gigs in Cuba too. Cuba was amazing. Yeah, yeah, because nobody's
That's
supposed to
actually
go to
that's actually
Cuba.
my next question. So let me go into that. So you were part of the cultural exchange program in Cuba starting in 2002. What was that experience like? How did it influence your music? How did it influence your approach as an artist?
Yeah, so the first time I went to Cuba was with it was with a girl that I had met at the womb. I used to have a radio show and I used to collaborate with a very good friend of mine and a good partner to this day, Mark Christopher, one of the first radio stations on the internet. It's called The Womb. Amazing, like way ahead of its time. So through him, I met this girl who was working with I think it was MTV, Gisela, and she had gone to Cuba and gotten like an artist exchange visa for herself. And she came back and she was looking for an engineer to go and record music in Cuba. But she couldn't really find anybody. And she spoke to Mark. Mark recommended me. We met. She heard my stuff and she said, would you like to go? And she said, I can get these visas through my work. I know how to apply. I know how to do it. Go down there and record. And the idea was to do it kind of like because it's very complicated in Cuba. You can't just go and record and release it, so it has to be more of a kind of like something you do for the art of it rather than a business venture, because the business venture would be just like there's so much red tape. But she said, man, there's something really special happening there, and she gave me these tapes, she gave me these CDs, and I heard it, and I was like blown away by what I heard. I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, they were like on a whole nother level. Like the music, the production of the music was on like some Jay Dilla shit. Like it was some Tribe Called Quest shit. You know what I mean? It was like the production was smooth. It was like oh, beautiful. And the lyrics, that's what got me the most, because the flows were like super soulful, super intricate, and super deep. Like, they were basically, every song was conscious, and they were talking about their situation in Cuba. Like, they were talking about their experience, but a lot of it, they were saying it like in a double entendre. They would say it without saying it. They would say it in a way where it's like you understood exactly what he was saying, but you couldn't pin him to anything. It was just brilliant. So she said, well, all these kids right now, the kids in Cuba are obsessed with hip hop, not with rap. They're obsessed with hip hop. And they're like, there's jams, there's parties. There's only a few producers in Cuba, you know what I mean? But they don't have access to the studios, because the studios are only recording cultural Cuban music, like traditional music. And they don't see hip hop as something that's beneficial to the government. So therefore, like, all this stuff is out there and it's not being recorded. And I feel like, we need to like go and catch some of it. So I signed up, and I went down there, and we brought some equipment, very, very rudimentary equipment, like a laptop and a couple of nice like mics, two microphones, like an Avalon, like a preamp. So we had like a very small but very high end, like a laptop, a good interface, a good preamp. We had an Avalon and a good microphone. I think we have like some type of like U87 type clone. I think I want to say, but it was phenomenal tube mic. So we had like a signal, like our signal path was proper. It was like world class, very, very simple. It was an ordeal to get it in there. I'm not gonna get into the details of that because I don't want to incriminate myself, you know. But we basically got the stuff in there, and when we got there, it's like, okay, we got to set up shop, we got to record. I was introduced to the people behind the music. Two main groups that I had to record. Two main people. Um, Pablo Herrera, who was one of the original producers of the Orishas, like phenomenal producer, like just his beats were on a whole nother level. And he basically he was Afro-Cuban, and he basically had like, just by him, like just with tapes, chopping up tapes, was making beats. And some foreigners, some Europeans heard it, and they said, man, this kid's a flipping genius. So they bought him an MPC and sent it to Cuba. And he had the only MPC in Cuba. So it was really interesting that he was the only kid with an MPC in Cuba, but he was also like phenomenally talented. And he had now and he had like access to the dopest flipping MCs, and they all wanted to record with him. So it was like a very special situation where he was like working with the 20 best hip hop artists of that time in Cuba, and they all needed to record. They were all crazy about recording. The other band was Frijol Negro, which is like a funk, like hip hop band, kind of like, I want to say like, oh, there's nothing comparable like now that I can think of, but it was like funk, psychedelic soul, like P-funk, Latin hip hop, but just really dope, really funky, really soulful again. So I needed to my task was to record those two bands. So for that time period, I think in 2 weeks, Like I never saw anything other than the screen in front of me. Like we set up shop. It was really interesting because we had to like we would have to like we had a room, but we had to pad it. We had to. So I said, you know what, we need to get blankets. Or what do you mean blankets? We can't go buy blankets. There's no blankets. You can't just go to the store and buy blankets. So it's like we had to make shifts. Okay, can't get blankets. Like let's get cardboard. No, bro, we can't get cardboard. Like we don't know where to get cardboard. There's no cardboard. Like it's like, what? Are you kidding me? Dude, these kids, man, they're so organized. Like, they're like, okay, okay, call Timmy. Oh, yo, you call this guy, call like all of them came together to pull cardboard and blankets from the cousin, from the aunt, from this, like, within a matter of hours, it was like a swarm of people just bringing all kinds of stuff. I don't know how they communicated, but they were so organized and they were so like, like they were all like acting as one. They were like, they just wanted to get this done. And it was just like, I never experienced that, because in the United States, we're in the mindset of competition. We don't have that kind of like, over there, you have to. The only way you're going to get anything done and the only way anyone's going to get recorded is if, you know what I mean, these tasks get completed and they all come together to complete it. It was like just mind blowing to see that, and it was really interesting because the kids, they were like, not with this and not with that. That for me, that was the most prevalent message that I heard. They were like, they were not with this and not with that. They were just not fully into like, they weren't with the regime and all that. They had, and they weren't with the capitalists either. They kind of like had their own ideals. They were kind of like, they were independent, very independent. They were questioning, and they were like, like a lot of the lyrics were about like, critiquing both things. Kind of like, coming from their own personal perspective, not from the perspective of a government or, which I found really, really interesting. So we proceeded and we recorded like, it was like 20 bands. It's like jaw dropping. And Pablo had all the beats already arranged. We're tracking right there into the Motu, like just track by track. And then they would come and like one take, like, these kids would come in and one take, boom, 1, 2, 3 takes max. And they had all their parts. They had harmonies. Like they had like, it was just insane because they would do parties. Like every weekend they would do parties with routines and everything all over the island. So it was like, they weren't just, these were songs that they had been performing for probably a couple of years. They had them down. They had the beat down. They had like, so it was super polished stuff. And that project with Pablo actually, like later down the, like a couple of years, Pablo moved out of Cuba, and Pablo was always a scholar, and he's a musicologist now. And he was in Scotland, and he basically, that project, those recordings, they got admitted to the library of Harvard University. So they were like, they're for safekeeping. They're put on vinyl and they're like now part of the library at Harvard, like to be preserved. That was really, really good. Like, but anyways, anybody that can, if you want to hear good hip hop that was way ahead of its time, listen to Havana Hip Hop Volume 1 or Havana Hip Hop Volume 2. It's on vinyl. Look it up, Pablo Herrera. You're gonna hear some shit that's like on some like, like next level stuff, especially if you speak Spanish, really mind blowing stuff. The other band was Frijol Negro. And yeah, that was funk and soul. We did some really, really amazing recordings that turned out to be like the pre-recordings for the albums that they did later. And most of them moved out. I remember Telmari Diaz, like amazing rapper from Cuba. Like she had like there was like the kids would come in like wearing like a shirt that had holes all over it. You know what I mean? That like sneakers that had like a huge crack and you can see their toes showing, But they came in like sweaty from the street and like with so much love and so ready, you know what I mean? And so like well spoken, so like polite, and well spoken and so like, you know what I mean? Like so focused. Like I'd never seen that or experienced that, like that level of focus. And then they would open their mouths and like, the stuff that would come out of their mouth was just so intelligent. I was just like so blown away by it for these kids. It's like, Never experienced anything like that. And then with Gio Darder, the same guy who took me to Cuba, to Brazil, he also organized parties in Cuba. So I did like 3 or 4 of those through the years, you know, where I also collaborated with different people, different DJs, DJ Joy Ivan, and experiencing the Cuban dance music scene was incredible. And DJing, you know, the Cuban, like, you know, in Cuba during that. Recording in Cuba was amazing in that period, and then DJing in Cuba, because there was nobody that I know of. There wasn't a lot of Americans. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but there wasn't a lot of Americans at all, like, you know, going to Cuba to DJ, you know. So I was so blessed by those opportunities and getting to experience that, you know, like really unique opportunities, like life-changing.
Your Fabric London compilation. What was it like to see some of your early work re-released?
Oh, that was so
Fabric.
nice. Yeah, that was totally unexpected. That was some work with Joe with Georgia Costa. Yeah, that was very, very nice. It's a song called Time, actually. It's like, you know, like, so it's like so weird because like after so much time, that song, you know, gets chosen to come out on that compilation. It was really, really such a blessing.
Tell us about Who Do You Love? It combines disco, funk, house, soul, Afro Latin influences. What was your vision? And what was the most rewarding part of that project?
Okay, so that project, it's actually like has been on hold. It's really weird, but like it was supposed to come out before the COVID, and kind of COVID kind of threw the whole thing off. And it's now going to get released eventually. Like, you know, like I have plans for that to be released. The concept with that is so I've been doing like Agape featuring Nadia Harris, which was like dub funk and soul. That was like my life, as far as my life band shows, that was my focus for many, many years. So I wasn't producing house music. I wasn't producing like, you know, dance music so much. I was more like just focused on Agape featuring Nadia Harris. So I said, okay, I want to do house again. I want to do dance music again, but I want to like, you know, not do like just tracks, you know, I want to like take, I've been working with live musicians now for such a long time. You know, let me do a live dance music project and and perform a live show, but with the perspective of a DJ, like, you know, just kind of like have a crescendo, you know, like just like, you know, how as DJs, you know, we build the night, you know what I mean? We go from slower to faster to like, you know, um, I want to do that. I want to have a live dance music band, and but approach it from the mind of a DJ. Like I want to DJ a band, you know. Um, and we did it, and it was a collaborative project. So I approached several musicians that were here based in Miami, and we recorded that song. And that song is basically like, you know, about like who do you love means like, you know, loving yourself. It's about self-love because you can't love anybody unless you love yourself, you know. So that's what the song was about. Like I was blessed with so many great musicians, like, you know, on that project. Diogo Brown on bass, Maxiana on the vocals, uh, just like, you know, just an amazing cast of musicians. And then, you know, like, you know, the wind came out of us because we had all these plans to release it, and we shot a nice music video at the Electric Pickle, which is an iconic live venue at the time. And then COVID came, and it's just like we just said, okay, let's pause it because the whole point of releasing this is so we can play live. Like that was the plan. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, we're gonna release this so we could play live. They said, okay, let's just hold on because we thought it was gonna be a few months. You know, like it's gonna be maybe like a couple of weeks. At first, we thought, okay, it's gonna be a couple of weeks, but it turned out to be like a lot longer, and they kind of got like, you know, like everybody just moved away. Like Maxiana, she moved to like Orlando, like, you know, somewhere else in Florida. So it kind of we got disbanded, and it's been like now it's like, okay, we got to release this, we got to remix it, release it. So that's what we're in the process of doing now, is releasing that project along with other songs. There's more songs part of that project. The project's called Erick, Paredes and Friends, and I've recorded like maybe like another 5, 6 songs, all live, all like live musicians, you know. all like collaborative projects, collaborations. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to releasing that. That's in the works.
Tell us about Rudy.
Oh, Rudy. So Rudy is so I've been involved in hi-fi audio. Um, I've been like working as a consultant at one of the best places, in my opinion, in Miami or in the United States, for that matter, for hi-fi audio sound systems, Soundlux Audio. So I've been learning a lot. But the owner of Soundlux Audio, one day called me and said, Eric, you know I've been getting requests to do more and more live vinyl parties, like private events, which are amazing because they're like, they're higher paying, especially like, if it's a higher end clientele. They're like higher, like the fees are more. And now they were asking, like one lady, she said, okay, I want an art install. I want a DJ, but I don't want a DJ to just be pressing buttons. I want a DJ that's gonna play vinyl. So I got recommended to it. And he goes, but I have this vision. I want the vinyl to be shown. Like, I don't want you in the corner somewhere back. I want my guests to appreciate the vinyl aspect of it. So it's kind of like an art installation. So I said, oh, that's really cool. And being that I worked at Soundlux, we got to get a really nice sound system for this. So I ended up like, renting like the Allen Heath. I think it's called the 2012 or 2014. It's a really nice rotary mixer. I think it's like a $6,000 mixer right now if you can find one. Really like high end and turbo sound speakers and 1200s. So we did a vinyl gig and people loved it. So I said, you know what? I gotta like put together a sound system for this, because these kind of events, they require like rotary. They want to see rotary mixers. They want higher quality of sound now, and I love it. It's something that I love to do. It's much more fun. It's much more like, like engaging for me to play on and they're willing to pay more for it. It's like, let me do it. Let me figure it out. So I'd expressed that to Erick from Soundlux. And he said, okay, one day he calls me, he goes, hey, Eric, like I got this call from this lady selling some speakers, and she's got some Altec speakers, and I think I'm gonna get those, but she's also got these Bozaks. I'm like, you might want to check them out because they might be good for like your hi-fi gigs you're trying to do. And I go, Bozaks, like Bozaks, they make speakers, like, because I know Bozak, the rotary mixer, like the original granddaddy of them all, like, the mixer that's before the Uri, the mixer that, was used at the Paredes garage and Studio 54, originally the Bozak, which predates the Uri. And then every other rotary mixer kind of like takes their cues from those mixers. So I went to see it, and sure enough, like, these big ass speakers, like the size of fridges, they're like about 5 feet tall, they're huge. I said, Jesus, what am I gonna do with these speakers on my house? Like what am I gonna put them? There's no way I can. And I've seen that they were like about $4,000. Like there's one for sale for $4,000 on eBay. I said, there's no way I'm gonna buy these because even if she wants $2,000, I'm not gonna buy these big ass monstrosities for $2,000 each. That's $4,000, even if she sells it for half. But I get there and she's like, yeah, like I'll sell them for you. I'll give you an amazing price. I'll sell them to you for $6,000 for both. I'm like, no way. It was really nice meeting you. I think you could like sell them for like, you can get a lot more, if you put them on eBay. And she tells me, okay, you know what, like I really have to sell them, so maybe I'll give you a better price because this house, I sold the house and I need to get all the stuff out of the house by this date, or else whatever's in the house contractually belongs to the new owner. So I didn't hear from her, but she texted me and she goes, Eric, would you accept 4,000? No. Like 2 weeks more. Like, would you accept 2,000? No. So then she eventually like went down to a ridiculous price. I don't even want to say, but she goes, "You gotta come pick them up today." So I went and I got these speakers, and like I put them in my house, turned them on, and I was shocked. I was like, "Holy crap!" No, I turned them on at her house, just through like my computer and like some cheap amp that I took over there. And I was impressed at the sound over there because they sound like they have a specific sound. They have like it's a very like relaxed, like kind of like effortless sound. It's very soothing, but it's like something mesmerizing about them. Took them home, same deal. It's like, wow, these speakers, they sound like something amazing about them. They're like super they have detail, but at the same time they're like very warm and very relaxed. Like they don't sound like like pushed at all. There's like no distortion. Even if you put a lot, they just sound relaxed. It's like, wow, these speakers are really cool. So I thought, man, one day it'd be great to be able to have a Bose, a CMA, CMA like 10 to the L, CML, the original Bose mixer. It would be great to have that, and these speakers maybe like have a sound system that was all Bose. But I didn't even know, so I started looking into it. I was like, nah, man, I'm not gonna buy a Bose mixer. They're crazy. The prices are insane. But while I was looking for the mixers, I saw that there was amps, like Bose amps. So it's like, and I saw some that were like really expensive, but then I saw some that were really good price. So I said, you know what? Like, let me buy these amps. So I was able to buy some Bose amps. And in the process of looking into all this, I realized it's like a Bose cult. There's like Bose is like it was one of the most they would compete with Klipsch back in the 60s, and they had a following. They had like a really good following back in those days, and they were like considered to be the height of like hi-fi in that golden era. But for some reason, like they're like most people don't know that there's Bose speakers and Bose, and they're all very high quality. So I bought them, and then I started to get more requests to do hi-fi audio, like gigs. So I said, you know what? Like if I'm gonna do a Bose like sound system, I have to have a Bose mixer, and it has to be the original. So I ended up like buying one right there. So I got it. So I got it. I got an amazing price. I got an amazing, like only possible Henry Street Records. Like you're familiar with Henry Street Records?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Dave was super, super, super nice and was able to get one, legit one. It's very, very clean. So I bought it, right? Got the amps, 2 amps. It's called the Green Monster, the 912, the 919, and it was just like a beautiful, big flipping amp. It's solid state, but it's called the Green Monster because it's got these big VU meters. And another amp it's also like a 919, but it's the version for professional use. It doesn't have so together, these are bi-amped. And yeah, and so we pulled it off. We did the first event 2 weeks ago, and it was phenomenal. It's like the sound was amazing. It was like very electric kind of sound. Of course, we hooked it up. We added some Martin subs, the Martin sub to it, so the sound was big, very relaxed, very, very like engaging sound. So yeah, so I'm really, really excited about that. About this sound system. I want to use it to do more of those events, but also to do pop-ups, like vintage hi-fi pop-ups in Miami. And I call the sound system Rudy because of Rudy Bozak. So Rudy Bozak, the legendary, you know, um, audio engineer, audio maker. His name was Rudy Bozak. So we called the sound system just for short Rudy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell us about your lathe.
Oh, the lathe. So the lathe came into the picture.
And tell people what a lathe is first.
Oh yeah. So a lathe is a device. a machine to cut records. So most records are pressed, right? Like this. But in order to make any records, the first step into going into vinyl is you have to cut a record. So you have to actually put a blank, it's called an acetate, or and basically you cut in real time, and there's a whole artistry. It's a very complicated process to cut a record. And so a lathe is the machine that basically cuts the grooves into a record. There's very few of them, period. The ones that are in use are mostly from the 50s and 60s and the 80s, like a lot of them are German, like brands like Neumann. There's some like Scully, lathes, that are still in use. But there's very few new ones. There's very few that are new. So I've been DJing like my own edits. So when I DJ, I would say a big percentage of my DJ sets is my own edits. So from getting invited to different places to play vinyl, I would cut my own edits and play them myself. So I would be looking for I'd go out and I'd press my own dub plates. But it was expensive, and it took a long time. That's what really got me. It was like sometimes it take like 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get. So I started realizing, you know what, like it'd be amazing to have a lathe. And I found out about a company that sells lathes that are new, and told a couple of friends about it. And I like a friend of mine said, okay, I'm gonna contact them, and contacted them and never heard from them. Then another friend of mine contacted them, and then they got back to him, and he asked it's just everything's just fizzled out. He never heard from them again. Turns out that the people selling these slates are based in Germany, but they're very old. They're like the last flipping OGs of like the business, and they make these things by hand, and they only make a few per year. So they're very, very picky to who they sell them to, and they're not like they're not like they're old school. So their ways of like operating are very like they're not like gonna respond to you in a jiffy. They're not like they're very cut and dry. They're German, so they're like they're just to the point, no frills, no. So it's very hard to communicate with them. So anyways, I applied and I forgot about it. I thought, that's it, like most people like never hear back, but like sure enough, like about like almost 9 months later, they got back. And long story short, like to buy one, you have to travel to Germany. They only sell you one if you put down a deposit, first and foremost, you gotta put down a deposit. And if you're willing to go to Germany, you gotta buy a ticket, go to Germany, get trained, and then they'll sell you one, if everything goes good, like if, what I mean, if they like you. Um, so yeah, so next thing like I'm like flipping like out of nowhere, like it's like they called and said like can you be here in 2 weeks? Like we have a lathe, and we possibly sell you, but you have to be here in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh my God, dude, like so like I'm like, what should I do? It's like, okay, if you say no, I can't forget about it, because it's just gonna move on, it's really rare to get back to people. It's just like if they're telling you to go in 2 weeks, don't say no, because that's it. You know what I mean? They're not gonna, you know what I mean? They're just gonna move on to the next person on their list. I'm not gonna go backwards, and it's just like God knows. It's just better take the opportunity while it's there. So yeah, so I signed up. Sent them the deposit. Bought it, tried to buy a ticket. It was crazy expensive to get the ticket at the last minute. Then at the last minute, I realized my visa was expired. So it's like, no, my passport was expired. My passport was completely expired. So like at the last minute, and then they tell you, look, you have to be in Stuttgart in Germany on such date by 8 p.m. Because they live in the middle of nowhere. Like Stuttgart is a small city, and then they'll send you to a smaller city, and then they're out in the woods, in the flipping German Alps and shit. So they said, so we have to come get you, right? But we can't. There's gonna be like you're one of like 4 people that are coming, but we gotta pick you up. So if you're not there, no excuses. You'll be sent back. We're gonna send you back. If you're not there by 8 p.m., we're gonna send you back. Like no excuses, right? But very boldly. And it's like I was saying, no, they're not gonna do that, man. Come on. Like all the tickets that I could get, I could only get there like at 10 p.m., 11, and I bought a ticket to get there at 10 p.m. And super, super crazy story. It's like I bought the ticket and then I told my partner. My partner with this is a good friend of mine who I mentioned before, Mark Christopher. And he's my partner with the late, and he basically said, no, you know what, Eric, like, bro, like, I hate to say it, but like these guys are German, they're old. If he tells you he's gonna cancel your ass if you don't get there at 8, believe him, bro. Like you might just get there, you know what I mean, and you're like 8:01, and you might just like freaking like you don't know, like plus it's not like you can just get on the phone and talk to them, or you can go back and forth with the communication. It's really, really strange situation. So I was like, okay, I guess I gotta cancel that flight. I don't know how much it's gonna cost me. I didn't buy insurance. I said, like, can't chance it. Like, I gotta get a way more expensive ticket. But so funny, like when I went to cancel it, my ticket was already canceled because my transaction never went through because I used PayPal and PayPal denied the charge. So it turns out I didn't have a ticket to begin with. So then I found another ticket, and I had to get there like at 6 p.m. Bro, I had to like land in Stuttgart, take like buses, trains, and stuff like that. Somebody jumped in front of a train. Anyways, I got there like at 7:45. I was supposed to be there at 6. I thought I wasn't gonna make it. So I got to Germany and they took me to the Alps, stuff like that. And these guys, man, you gotta see them, bro. They're like German, they're like 80 years old, big long beards, you know what I mean? They're like wizards, man, in the middle of nowhere, just with all their lathe equipment, like. So yeah, so I got the training and bought a lathe and brought it to Miami. And now I've been setting it up, but it's not as easy as it sounds. Oh my God, it's like one of the most difficult things. Because there's so many variables that you gotta get right. And it's not like, there's like a handbook, you know what I mean? It's not like you can pick up the phone and call somebody. It's like you kind of pretty much like, like you get support, but it's not like, it's not immediate, and it's not like, it's very difficult. Like there's weights and counterweights. There's the temperature of the room. Then there's the temperature of the heat that's applied to the platter. Then there's the heat of the needle, the pressure, the distance, all these variables. And when one variable is off, you don't know when you're starting, you don't know which variable is off. Just something's off, you know what I mean? It's just not sounding good. That's besides the electronics, And so you change one thing and it's like, oh my God, this doesn't sound good. It takes you hours to figure out which element. When you change one thing, it's like a puzzle, Change one thing and it's like everything just changes. Change one thing, it's just. So yeah, but it's been a really, really good journey with the lathe. And I'm at the point now where very soon we're gonna start cutting for people. And we're super excited about that. We're gonna like, we're gonna do like micro releases for dance music projects of my own and my close immediate friends. And of course also offer services for people who want to cut dub plates, etc. And many, many, many plans that I'd be happy to talk to you in the future about it as we move further into the project. But that's it right there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tell us about Believe in Cowbell Afro-Tropic edits.
So yeah, so I've been like I said, like I've been doing a lot of edits for my set, my DJ sets. And every time I DJ, I get like a lot of requests. People, oh, what is this? I want it. So I started this series of Afro-Tropic. So my style of music, like what I usually play is like twofold. Like I have like a soulful house side, like full soulful deep, like just just house music, just good house music, deep. I think soulful is what describes it all. It can be techie, but it can be Detroit kind of, like techie, but always soulful, like like everything that I that I that I that I that I that I put my attention towards that catches my ears always soul and stuff. So one side is soul, like edited a couple of songs, like Minority Band, uh Tasty Tune, and so one side is it's four songs. But one side is like soulful house, and funk and soulful house, which is one side of what I do, and the other side is Brazilian and Latin. So Nega, it was one of the songs by Wando, and another song Suéltala para que se defienda, which is a cumbia song. But all in 4/4. So like so it's both on my sides, like believe in cowbell. Do you believe in cowbell? Do you believe in the power of cowbell, of the cowbell? So yeah, so that's it. So like so I pressed it, and it's mostly a promo only, and just share it with my friends, mostly, and gotten some amazing response from it. Pretty notable DJs playing it, and even Giles Peterson played it on BBC Six radio, which is huge. Made me very happy, and very encouraging, for Giles to play it.
Tell us about
So
your.
I got.
Sorry, go
Excuse
ahead.
me?
No,
Oh yeah,
sorry.
and so there's more of those coming out. There's more volumes of that. That was volume one. Now with the latest, probably gonna be smaller runs, possibly. But just promo. Those are just promo only, not for sale, which is mostly for promotional, What were you saying?
Um. Oh yeah. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, legacy. Um, that's a good question. In terms of music,
Mhm.
um, just to like, I feel like to be looked at as somebody who did good music, and who didn't compromise so much, like who didn't compromise his artistic visions for monetary gains, necessarily just strictly for monetary gains, and just to be, to just for if someone can listen to my music in the future and still enjoy it, like and think back and say, oh, dude, that dude, he made some great music, made people happy, and you know what, is still making me happy to this day, and and to reach the maximum amount of hearts, in a very honest way, like to get to people's hearts, not to get to their heads or to their wallets, but to touch people, like on touch people's hearts, and a good amount of people. That would be my what I would like. I don't want to like necessarily get to a point in my legacy where it's like, oh, this guy, he made some music, he made a lot of money, blah blah blah, or he did this, he did that, but like for me, it's the hearts. If I can touch people's hearts, maximum amount of people's hearts into the future, that I would like that to be my legacy, and to be looked at as someone who is genuine.
Last question. If people want to book Erick, or if they want something pressed on the lathe, or if they want to book Rudy, how do they book you?
Okay, so contact me on Instagram. That's the best thing. Instagram or Facebook, Erick Paredes. I'm friends with you on Instagram, so they could always find me through there. Or the name of my website is sustainablemusic.com. and we don't have anything yet there in terms of the lathe or or Rudy. But it's coming up. This is all new stuff. Like this is the first time that I'm publicly talking about it, really. Like, although there's already a buzz, it's been really interesting. A lot of people have been hitting me up about cutting dub plates and stuff like that, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, just contact me through there, or email me, Erick@sustainablerecordings.com. Erick,
Perfect.
Erick.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, my man. It's such a pleasure to reconnect with you in this way. And
Absolutely. Fantastic to reconnect.
Absolutely. I feel so blessed, by the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.